Hello and welcome to the Dodger Game channel. You're watching a Mormon Truth video. This is probably going to be a real short one compared to most. I had a request today asking if I could make, something short. They mentioned, hey, people don't have real long attention spans all the time. What do you think about something in the 5-minute range? Well, there's not a whole lot of detail that I'm able to get into documenting specific elements of LDS history and what goes on with the scriptures and the changing doctrines in the LDS Church in 5 minutes. If you're making decisions about your life and salvation as you perceive it to be, it's pretty important. It's worth investing a lot more than 5 minutes in to make life-changing decisions and to decide what you're going to dedicate yourself to and what your belief systems are. So there are very clever people out there that will give sophisticated arguments to make things appear differently than they are. So what I like to do is use documentation off of LDS.org a lot of the time for scriptures and so forth, and the gospel topics essays, and compare what they have to say with what the scriptures actually teach. And they're usually exactly opposite. So what I've got here on the Dodger Game channel is an opportunity to learn the truth about, the church's history, which you don't get in gospel doctrine class. They may tell you that, but that's not the case. I have many years of study and I know the difference. So, not that I'm saying I'm a know-it-all, but I do know that the church is into information control big time, just like the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Scientologists and I suppose SDA are too. Because when you find out that they haven't been honest with you and the doctrine keeps changing, because evidently Jesus keeps changing his mind, well, that just doesn't work with the assertion that an all-knowing and unchanging God, perfect in every facet of his character, guides through revelation to the brethren, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So, anyway, let's just say that you haven't been told the truth about the church's history in Sunday school. I know that because I used to teach Sunday school, and I know what they teach. You probably weren't taught that Joseph Smith was a practicing necromancer and magician long before he published the Book of Mormon. If you think that's something wild that some born-again Christians made up as anti-Mormon propaganda, well, you got another thing coming, because I've heavily documented it in several of the videos that are on this channel, including Lucy Mack, Joseph's own mother. So, things started differently, and they've been different the whole time. There are multiple aspects of Joseph Smith's history that have been altered and smoothed over, with very important details omitted in what we call the correlated lesson materials that are furnished by the church in manuals, whether they are digital, online, now, or otherwise, and other web pages within the church's website, LDS.org. It's shocking to learn these things, but that's the way it is. People don't know what they're getting into before they get into the temple endowment. You don't know exactly what you're going to be pledging, at least unless they've changed that recently. There's a lot of creepy stuff involved, even though people will tell you it's all beautiful. Well, a lot of people will tell you there's some pretty screwed up stuff going on there, although not as much as there were before 1990 and not as much as there were long ago. Okay? A lot of the gnarliest stuff is gone. Of course, if it's an eternal thing revealed by Jesus Christ to Joseph Smith instead of, what it actually is, then that wouldn't be the case now, would it? The first vision is not historical. The one you've been taught in primary and Sunday school is one that Joseph Smith's family actually never heard of. And I document that heavily, showing the statements that his family made regarding his spiritual journey. And it certainly doesn't include a visit from God the Father and Jesus Christ in 1820. What his family members do say is that they all started going to these revivals in 1823. Understanding Mormon Astrotheology in the Book of Abraham. There's so many subjects here in about 100 and, well, it's about 150 videos, but a few of them are redundant, redos with better quality, more pictures and things like that. Bottom line is, the Book of Mormon is not historical. It's filled with anachronisms, meaning things that were not possible at that time. Like, people speaking Greek 2200 BC, the, time the Jaredites came over, or even when the Nephites were there. All sorts of things. In fact, contradicting itself in the very next verse. Good example would be like in 2 Nephi chapter 5, verses 15 and 16, I guess. Yeah, that's just an example where they have all kinds of precious ores and things in a great abundance. And the next verse, they're building the temple like the Temple of Solomon, except for they can't put any precious things in it because they don't have any in the land. And it's like, hey, you left them in the last verse. Or in the Doctrine and Covenants where it says Jesus, it doesn't use the word Jesus, but it's referring to him as the only begotten of the Father. The next verse, it says that through him, meaning through Jesus, the worlds are and were created, and the inhabitants thereof, in other words, the space aliens, are begotten sons and daughters unto God. Contradicting what was just said in the prior verse. Just a couple of weird little examples. Of course, a real big one would be the brother of Jared story in Ether chapter 3, where the brother of Jared is told several things that are, well, pretty important. One is in verse 14, he's told that Jesus Christ is both the Father and the Son. Of course, all through the Book of Mormon, we have the doctrine that Jesus and the Father are actually the same being. Joseph Smith didn't start teaching that they were separate beings till about 1835, I think. And that God the Father had a body, probably didn't start that till around 1842, a body of flesh and bone. He was just a body of spirit, per the Lectures on Faith, lecture number 5. Well, in that chapter 3, you probably also might have noticed that Jesus then tells the brother of Jared that he's the first that's ever seen him, the first person that's ever seen him. That's mentioned in verse 15. Verse 9 and verse 15 basically say that it's because he had more faith than anyone's ever had, which is why he was able to see beyond the veil. Now, this is over 1,000 years after the Lord was face to face with Enoch, as is said in Moses chapter 7, verse 4, and subsequently spent 365 days with Enoch and all of his people in the city of Zion. 240 years into this experience, they go down to Adam-on-Diamond in Davies County, Missouri, which is mentioned in Doctrine and Covenants section 107, and in verse 54 it says that the Lord appears to them, all those people, all the patriarchs, about 8 of them, in other words, Adam through Methuselah, and all the other righteous descendants of Adam at that time, so all their friends and family, basically the same people that would already have been with Jesus in the city of Zion. Of course, this is, 700 or 800 years before this business, where he tells Enoch, did I say Enoch? Excuse me. Where he tells the brother of Jared, 150 years after the mythical flood of Noah, that he's the first to ever see him. So that's a really blatant one. Why did Jesus lie in the Book of Mormon to the brother of Jared? Absolutely contradict what Joseph Smith later published in the Book of Moses and the Book of Doctrine and Covenants. If you're wondering about that Davies County business, that's confirmed in section 116. It's only one verse, as I recall. So, yeah, I think Jackson County is about where they say the Garden of Eden was, so they took a little walk to Davies County. Well, I've burned up about 10 minutes here and just given a little bit of information that tells you there's massive contradictions in the scriptures. The history is much different than you've been told. And I don't want you to try to just take it on my word. I've got over 100 videos in here. I've got the scriptures showing where these things are located, or other primary source materials regarding the history. You can also see in church publications and books published by people like, say, Joseph Fielding Smith, church historian and prophet and apostle, when he published, Essentials in Church History, when he actually lied about the name of the church. He didn't seem to think that you should know it was first named the Church of Christ, and then in 1834 was named the Church of the Latter-day Saints for the next 4 years or so, taking the name of Jesus or Christ out of it. So he lies about that in that particular book of church history, Essentials in Church History, as did Gordon B. Hinckley in Truth Restored. The cover-ups have started with Joseph Smith and continued. LDS.org houses the Gospel Topics essays for the church apologists who claim to be just essay writers and act like they're doing something fair and balanced, which they are not. Try to deal with problems like this, or why Joseph Smith had, 30-some wives that they show sealed to him on LDS websites. 10 of them actually were currently married to other guys, and one of them wasn't ever even a member of the church, and they say he was sealed to these girls. In fact, he hadn't had any revelations for years after the first girl that he got pregnant, who just happened to be an orphan girl staying in their home, named Fanny Alger. But the church calls her his first plural wife. From about 1833 or so, when he got her pregnant? Ridiculous. There wasn't any revelation about anything like that. In fact, I think we show the section 132 as 1843, and Joseph Smith never put that into the church, as far as he never submitted that. He always denied he was involved with any other women or that he'd had any such revelation, except to his inner circle of friends in the Council of 50, or the Danites. These were secretive organizations, kind of like illuminated Freemasonry, which seems to be described in the Book of Moses, chapter 5, and throughout the Book of Mormon, and condemned, saying the Lord worketh not in secret combinations. Also, in the Book of James, in the New Testament, we are told and commanded not to forswear ourselves. Forswearing yourself is exactly what takes place in the temple endowment, in the portions that were brought in from Freemasonry, a Luciferian religion, as testified by their greatest and most famed leaders, such as Albert Pike, or other high-ranking 33-degree occultist Freemasons, Manly P. Hall. Pike and Paulba said that it is Luciferian, that they seek the light of Lucifer, the pure Luciferian doctrine, and Pike even said in Morals and Dogma, it's like the Masonic Bible, stating that the Master and Masons needed to harness the seething energies of Lucifer. Well, getting close to 15 minutes. At 14 minutes, so much for a 5-minute video, but I suppose you always could have turned it off if your attention span couldn't hold down that long. Then again, you now have reason to investigate these things. I document them. Never let someone else just convince you of something. Look for the documentation. That I have. I'm not a fancy talking LDS apologist. I just use the facts. Well, there's so much more that could be shared, but not in a video that's only this long. You're on the Dodger Game channel. Good search terms for my stuff would be things like 50 problems with the Mormon Church, and maybe combine that with LDS Gospel Topics essays, or of course best just get into the channel. If you put Dodger Game with any of that, it works. Dodger Game by itself, you're just going to look at the LA Dodgers baseball team. Can't compete with those search terms. Anyway, that's where you saw it. I call it the Mormon Truth Video Library. Never take out your endowments without knowing this stuff first. You have no idea what you're getting into. And why would the Lord tell Joseph Smith to go to a Luciferian group to get most sacred items, supposedly, and secret for the LDS endowment, when he could give him a revelation on everything from where to send you on a mission as to why not chew tobacco in your high council meetings and spit on the floor so Emma has to clean it up. You'd think that the temple endowment could be revealed directly rather than sending him to a Luciferian group like the Freemasons. Okay. Remember to hit the comments and to subscribe and hopefully like. And get in there and start exploring. Look at all this. First vision, DNA and the Lamanites, why Joseph Smith took other guys' wives, the Book of Abraham, a complete and total fraud. Not only has it nothing to do with Abraham, and they got the papyrus or the copies of it and translated it, nor was it written in his time, but the actual content is just so filled with things that are absolutely factually wrong, even inventing Jehovah, which the Catholics did in about 1300 AD. Jehovah finds his way into a text that was supposedly written 2000 BC. It's more ridiculous than you can imagine when you really know what the facts are. Get them in the Mormon Truth Video Library on the Dodger Game channel. Thanks.